Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Clark, Director of Archives at the Rockefeller Archive Center in Sleepy Hollow, New York. The Archive Center, or the RAC as we often refer to it, is a center for the study of philanthropy and its effects. We hold the records of over 40 foundations and nonprofits documenting their impact across the nation and around the world. We normally host over 400 researchers and respond to over 2,000 email inquiries each year. But as we know, these are no ordinary times. The global COVID-19 pandemic has affected how archives and archivists work, as well as how historians, teachers, students, and other users of archives are able to engage with the primary sources in our care. That's why we wanted to have this discussion today, October 20th, 2020, as part of Archives Month. We want to talk specifically about how the pandemic has affected us here at the RAC, but also provide tips and suggestions for how you, as users of archives, can engage with us and with other archivists and historical repositories as you do your projects. We also want to discuss how to effectively use online digitized primary resources in your research and in your teaching. So let me introduce my colleagues who will be having this important discussion today. Rachel Wimpy, Assistant Director for the RAC's Research and Education, or R&E program, will be moderating the panel. We also have Michelle Beckerman, Assistant Director for Reference, Bethany Antos and Renee Pappas, both archivists on the reference team, and Marissa Vasari, archivist and educator in the R&E program, who leads the RAC's K-12 education program. Also joining us is Liesl Vink, photo media editor and archivist, who is recording this presentation today and will be preparing it for posting online. So enjoy the conversation, and if you have any questions afterwards, please go to our website at rockarch.org or email us at archive@rockarch.org. Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Bob. I'm really so pleased to moderate this discussion and to answer some of the questions I've been hearing in the research and education community. The way we'll structure the discussion is that first, I'm going to pose some questions about accessing archival materials, making requests, getting in touch with our friendly reference archivists, things like that. Then I'll direct the conversation to resources available to use in teaching, from grade school all the way up to graduate seminars. So we'll start out with Michelle. Since our offices and reading rooms closed on March 13th, the work of your reference team hasn't stopped. Could you tell us a little bit about what that's been like?
Well, for the reference team, first we had to just adjust to working from home. Most of our reference tools are available online, so we would often refer to the researchers to those tools. We also let researchers know that once we were able to get on site, we might be able to provide further assistance. While we cannot become your personal assistant, once we're on site, we'll be able to give you estimates for duplication page counts, check citations, and things like that. We also have tools that aren't available online, and now that a few staff members are able to have limited access to the building, we can access those tools. And when I'm saying tools, I'm talking about things like card files, locator cards, and scan files that are not yet available online, often because of copyright issues. So basically, the best thing to do is to reach out to an archivist, and at the Archive Center, the best way to reach out to us is our general email address, archive@rockarch.org.
Yeah, and I think Michelle's Rockefeller Archive Center specific guidance can really be applied across archival repositories. If you as a researcher are interested in a particular collection, or perhaps your research trip this summer was derailed due to COVID, you have nothing to lose by reaching out to the archive, and more often than not, a friendly archivist will reach out to you to talk through your options.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Renee. Talking about digital records, as the pandemic has closed educational institutions and forced many of us into remote work and teaching, digital and digitized archival records are playing a vital role in many people's work. How have the RAC's digitization processes changed in response to COVID?
Our digitization processes actually haven't changed except for the turnaround. The processes are the same, but everything just takes longer. If you would like an estimate for the cost of your request, it might be delayed a bit until the staff member can come in to count the pages. Also, we're only able to have one person at a time scanning material since that's the way our equipment is set up. So there is a delay in completing requests. We did have a backlog of duplication requests from February and March, and we've been working our way through those requests that came in during the pandemic. Our first step was to contact the researcher and confirm that they still, months later, actually wanted the material that they had requested. And for those that did want the documents copied, we are actually working through our July request now. So also just, you know, people have to remember to manage what your expectations are too, of what we can do in what time frame we can do it.
And I would add in agreeing with Michelle, and sort of that principle carries through for reference writ large. You know, as staff, we ask for kindness and for understanding as we work through your requests. We want to answer them, but because things are a bit more challenging, it might take a little bit more time. But we'll get to you just as we're getting to our digitization requests, and we want to help you.
Thanks, Bethany. Thanks, Michelle. What about documents that are already digitized? What documents already are available, and how can researchers access them?
The digitized documents from the Archive Center are available in DIMES, our online catalog. As I mentioned earlier, there are files that might be scanned but might not yet be available online for a variety of reasons. And so the best thing to do is email an archivist at archive@rockarch.org and ask. We can then check to see if it has been scanned, and if not, we can help walk you through the steps of requesting a duplicate copy. Also, there's some scanned items from the Rockefeller Foundation archives that are available on the Rockefeller Foundation, a digital history site, rockfound.rockarch.org. And this covers the first 100 years of the Rockefeller Foundation. Some of our digitized films are available on a YouTube channel, on our YouTube channel. Also, annual reports and other publications are sometimes available on that philanthropy's website. And if you have information, and if we have that information, we'll let you know and pass that on to you. By asking an archivist about your research, we can offer suggestions as to where you might find material here, as well as at other archives and other institutions. The most important thing to do is to ask, and like Bethany said, we want to help.
In terms of not just the Rockefeller Archive Center, but archives writ large, I think it is always safe to assume that archives have digitized documents available that might not be readily accessible on their online catalog or on their respective websites. So when you do reach out to those particular archives, ask what digitized materials are available and if you can access them. And I'm sure the archivist will respond with pertinent materials for your research.
Michelle, how does your digitization team choose which archival records to scan?
Actually, the digitization team doesn't choose which records to scan. Some of the material is scanned because we felt it was the most useful, providing, as they say, a big bang for the buck. Some material has been slated for scanning because it's in fragile condition, or that it's heavily used, or is in a format that's no longer supported, think audio and videotapes. Other items have been scanned at the request of a donor organization or sometimes another researcher.
Bethany and Renee, how do you advise researchers to continue their work when they cannot consult archives in person? How have you had to adjust your guidance to people through their research processes?
So I can go first. For me, as I've been thinking through this question, I've discovered that a lot of my sort of tips and strategies are actually carried over from pre-COVID. Some of them have just taken on greater significance during this time. You know, when a researcher writes and they say, you know, I really wanted to come visit, but now I can't, what on earth do I do? Obviously, as we've said, the first thing we do is we check for digitized materials, either that relate directly to their project or perhaps might be more peripheral, but are available. And beyond that, the next step is I really do encourage some creative searching in our finding aids. So some repositories have a different name for this. We call them finding aids. They're lists of the contents of a collection, descriptions of the collection, box, folder titles, things like that. Some places call it a catalog. We call them finding aids. So you can do keyword searches in them. and in our finding aids. And so I recommend using a variety of synonyms, subject terms that might be close to yours or adjacent, searching for an institutional name as opposed to an individual. Most of the records, the majority of the records at the Rockefeller Archive Center are organizational and particularly philanthropic organizations. So a lot of times you're going to have the grantee organization is going to be an institution, not necessarily one person who is involved with that institution. You know, try common misspellings of people's names, of place names. Try both modern and historic spellings for geographical locations. You know, it never hurts to try and search and sort of see what else turns up. I also, going along with the finding aid theme, I tend to encourage researchers to look through a whole finding aid, sort of browse through. You might get a hit for one folder, or you say, oh, look, here are 2 folders in this finding aid. Click through, sort of see where do those fall into the whole finding aid. What are the folders before or after? You might find that there are other folders with names that you might not have immediately searched for that might be more relevant to your research. So, you know, you might say, hey, this is actually way more useful. Finding aids also include additional sort of contextual information. There's sometimes a description of what the collection is, like why does it even exist? Where does it fit in historically? What are the dates? Are they too early, too late for your research? That kind of a thing. Some of the folders will also have little sort of notes with them. You'll know, hey, this is only outgoing correspondence, which is useful to know, or, oh, this folder is entitled A, but it's actually mostly about the American Historical Association, or, you know, something like that. Michelle mentioned the annual reports, also really helpful way to sort of drill down, figure out, you know, did the Ford Foundation really fund this, or is that sort of an urban legend? You can figure that out. I can go really quickly into just a subset of secondary sources that I encourage researchers to poke around in, especially during this time of COVID. And I'll go through them really quickly. They're all accessible on our website under these sources. So it's rockarch.org. They're all accessible there. So I'll run through them pretty quickly. Michelle has already mentioned our Rockefeller Foundation digital history site. So it has brief essays about different programs and episodes in the Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation's history, and it has corresponding digitized documents that go along with that. We have a bibliography of scholarship, and we now have over 8,500 entries of different publications, books, articles, blog posts, etc., that cite from Archive Center materials. So you can use those sources, access them, and then sort of work backwards into collections, figuring out, okay, well, what did this researcher look at? Here's a citation, oh, this folder looks really relevant. Likewise, you can also use those, and you can sort of figure out if there are other institutions whose records might be more readily available that someone's used for their similar research. We also have Resource, which is our research and education program storytelling platform. And that highlights various stories from the history of American philanthropy in a number of different sort of thematic areas. Again, a really good resource for sort of placing things in context, particularly in terms of the philanthropy context. Finally, I'm almost done. I often direct people to our creatively titled research reports. As the name hints, individuals who receive one of the RAC's Research Stipend Awards, when they come to visit the Archive Center, following their visit, they submit a report about what kind of research they conducted while with us. They're short reports, they cite Archive Center materials, and again, they can sort of give people who can't immediately access these records a feel for what's this collection like, how have people used it, and it helps them sort of narrow things down. So again, I know I've thrown a lot out, but rockarch.org, all of these secondary sources that I've listed are all accessible there. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Bethany. Renee, what is your advice for researchers?
My advice is a lot of Bethany's advice. I would say that our strategies and suggestions are very similar. The only thing I would have to add is that in preparation for this webinar, I had reached out to some researchers who had already conducted on-site research at the Rockefeller Archive Center, as well as other institutions. And I had asked if they were relying solely on the information they found during their research trips, or if they were reaching out into online sources. And universally, they responded saying, well, when you go to the archive, you prep and you have a plan, but you don't know what's there until you're really in the thick of the documents. And once I get a sense, then I can go back and use whatever digitized materials I know are available that then complement what I already know, what I've already learned. And at this time, I would say, given the amount of digitized sources available to you, flip that process. Use what has been digitized to ground yourself in the history and context of the collections, and then you can move forward to possibly an in-person visit at some point in the future.
That's really helpful, Renee. Thanks. I'm wondering, just as we wrap up this section on accessing materials, is there anything else that any of you would like to share with the researcher community?
I will hop in here and just say that I really empathize with all of you. I did not have to conduct research during a pandemic, but I did have a research plan. I thought I had, gamed the system, and I had selected to use a collection that was available at the institution I was working at. It's like, great, I get paid and I get to research, perfect. And I still remember this years later, sitting in that reading room, and the page coming in to converse with the archivist, and hushed tones at the reference desk. And the archivist approached me and said, actually, that collection is not available right now. It's been shipped off-site for a major digitization project. And I still feel that embodied panic. I'm thinking that, I thought I had this all figured out. I just needed to follow the steps. And I had to come up with something new. And the big takeaway for me is what we've all been saying to you, is that I reached out to archivists at other institutions to find out what was available, and I was able to use digitized documents to complement my research.
And I would sort of just, as we're wrapping up sort of our reference section, I'll say it again, like, please reach out, don't be shy. We are here to help. We are here to help you. And that's why we are here. That's why the Rockefeller Archive Center exists. We want to provide access to our materials. So please, understand that things might be different and challenging, and we might have to sort of shift our strategies, but we are here to help. So just email us, archive@rockarch.org, and you will hear from us, and we will do our best.
You guys are an amazing team. Thank you all for all of this advice. We're going to turn now to our educational activities and resources for supporting teaching. So Marissa, I'm going to turn to you. As the Archive Center's archivist and educator, could you tell us a bit about the range of work you do to support teachers in normal times?
Sure. So we work to connect students with primary sources, more specifically with the materials housed at the Archive Center. And we really work to demystify the archive for students and make them feel as if they are a researcher, no matter their age. We work with the K through 16 community, and we develop primary source educational resources that target critical thinking, research skills, and media literacy skills.
And now that we've all gone remote and schools are either running remote or at half capacity, could you give everyone an idea of what resources are available to use in the K-16 classrooms now?
Sure. So we connect with 2 lab schools, and we work to create project models that are packaged and shared on our Teach with Our Collection site. That can be found through the main webpage, rockarch.org. And there you'll find primary source sets, primary source workshops, media literacy materials, and all of these are, again, meant to be flexible and connect students with primary sources. We also want to make sure that, just like the reference community is making sure that you can reach out and feel like you'll be assisted, always reach out to educators, and more specifically archival educators, and they're also eager to help.
Yeah, and Marissa, the work that you do to develop our educational resources in partnership with these lab schools has also been dramatically altered. So how has the Archive Center transitioned from in-class to virtual classroom visits?
So we are always working from a project-based model. So it's been pretty seamless. Again, we're always trying to support teachers. So we've transitioned to remote classroom visits. The project models take anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks. And I've been visiting classrooms via Microsoft Teams or via Zoom. And this has also led to some really great opportunities with educators who we normally wouldn't connect with that are too far away. So synchronous learning experiences and asynchronous learning experiences. Renee and I connected with a professor that we have a relationship with at the RAC, and that targeted undergraduate learning experiences and research experiences. So I think it really underlines the importance of being flexible and wanting to make sure that the teacher is supported.
Yeah, so bringing Renee back into this conversation, since you recently had an experience with a researcher, could you share that with us that as it connects to this discussion that we're having?
Definitely. I think this discussion really highlights all of the resources we have available for educators and students. And one of those resources is still the archivist. You do not need to be associated with a university or an independent research institution to contact us. You do not need to be someone you might think of as scholarly to begin your research here. And it brings to mind, as Rachel mentioned, my work with a high school student actually. So in 2019, at some point in the spring, a high school student in California reached out to me to ask for information regarding their great-grandfather. And I don't know about you all, but my mom would not have paid for me to fly across the country to go to an archive when I was a sophomore in high school. So I immediately went to a place where, what can I assist this person with, knowing they can't come visit? And I confirmed that, yes, we had records pertaining to their great-grandfather. And I didn't just confirm, I also provided digitized documents related to their great-grandfather that are not available on the website or on our online catalog. So this person really benefited from reaching out to an archivist. I provided links to the bibliography of scholarship and the research reports, as well as to the collection inventory that was pertinent to their grandfather's records, to give the student the context of why their grandfather would even have documents here at the Rockefeller Archive Center. And as the year went on, the student continued to reach out to me using the resources that I had provided, the finding aid, the research reports, some secondary sources, to continue to ask for digitized documents to support what became a much larger research project about Chinese doctoral students at the University of Chicago in the 20th century. And that turned into a very large scale research paper actually, and it is now living in our bibliography of scholarship if anybody would be interested in looking into it. But the big takeaway is this person worked with an archivist remotely, not just with me, but with people across the United States to create some very original and very robust research without having to step into an actual reading room. And it's something to take with us as we keep going forward in 2020, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Renee. Marissa, I wonder if you have advice for teachers and then maybe some key takeaways from this particular moment.
I think this time has made space for people to connect with colleagues in a way they haven't before, maybe reach out to instructors or information professionals that in the past they've been too busy. This has really sort of been a catalyst for making those connections. So I would suggest really making the time to connect with like-minded people. We have an AER roundtable, Archival Educators Roundtable listserv, where we connect education archival professionals. We have a newsletter, and we meet 4 times a year now remotely. So I would say take advantage of all of the networks that are out there and find resources that will support you in your teaching during this time and moving forward. And also that there are quite a lot of tools right now, and it may feel overwhelming, but just remembering that connecting students with primary sources, connecting them to the content is really what's most important. And so don't be afraid to try new tools or platforms, and just take advantage of all that's offered right now.
Yeah, we all need to be flexible. Thanks, Marissa. I just want to open it up to the whole group. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share?
Well, I actually have one, and that's I received an email from a longtime researcher, and she wrote and said, I've been making use of the officers' diaries again. It's weird using them because I can sometimes get so immersed that I am almost surprised to find that I am not in the reading room. So I just thought that that would be a sort of good way to sum this up. You know, using digital material is a good opportunity for us and for you.
Great. So I'll turn it back to Bob for final words.
Great. I just want to thank you, Rachel, for moderating this important conversation, and thank you to everyone who participated and shared your expertise. And to you, the viewers, I just want to emphasize the big takeaway. Whether you're an experienced researcher, a student, a teacher, or someone who is just historically curious, archivists do what we do because we want to provide access to our collections. So even if we're in the middle of the pandemic, don't be shy, ask for help. No matter the circumstances, our work continues. That's why we're here. So thanks for watching, and everyone stay safe.